So we talk about the 80-20. Next thing I learned, Pete told me, he said, you know that 20% of the people make 80% of the money in every field. Well, I was in my early 20s. I never heard that before. I said, really? He said, yeah. 20% of the people make 80% of the money. The other 80% have to fight for what's left over. And so I made a second decision which changed my life. And it was, well, if that's the case, I want to be in the top 20%. And that changed my life. It was never the same again. So now I've learned 2 or 3 things. I've learned there's a direct relationship between your level of skills, which can be increased, and your income. And I've learned that I was responsible. And I've also learned that I want to be in the top 20%. So from then on, I do what you would do. I would say, well, who's in the top 20%? How'd they get there? And then I found something else, is that everybody starts at the same starting line. And by the way, this is what they're finding. There's a best-selling book called Talent is Overrated. What they're finding is that everybody starts off with pretty much the same skills. Is if you actually study people who are really successful later in life, at the beginning of life, they didn't seem to have any skills. They didn't leap buildings with a single bound. They didn't seem to be, they weren't brilliant and sharp and superstars. I mean, they're just average people, just like other average people. And in the book Talent is Overrated, it talks about, imagine 2 young guys just got out of college, go to work as, they call them brand managers at Procter & Gamble. Procter & Gamble is a great company if you've got a job there, because they train you well. It's a good company. And these guys were sitting in a cubicle like Dilbert. 2 of them sharing a cubicle. And you know what their primary form of entertainment was? It was called wastebasket basketball. And what they do is they'd scrunch paper and they'd shoot baskets. Scrunch paper, shoot basket. And a person would walk by these guys, and they're in their early 20s, and say, you know, not much there. Just 2 average young guys. And at the bottom of the totem pole, in a huge company, there's 150,000 people. Well, know who those 2 guys were? One of them was named Jeffrey Immelt, who is now the president of General Electric, one of the biggest companies in the world. The other gentleman was named Steve Ballmer, now the president of Microsoft and a billionaire in his own right through stock options. Well, they look at these guys and they say, well, how did these guys get from playing wastebasket basketball at the bottom of the pecking order of a huge company to becoming 2 of the most important and highest paid executives in the world? And they found out the answer. The answer was continuous learning. It was what they called deliberate practice. He said these people and the people that they studied for this survey nationwide were people who recognized that in order for them to go higher, they had to learn a new skill. My friend Marshall Goldsmith has written a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. My title for him was Whatever Got You to Where You Are Today is Not Enough to Get You Any Higher. But he shortened it because of the book cover. but the point is this, is whatever got you to where you are today, it's not enough to get you any further. What these guys learned was that in order to move up, I'm going to have to learn certain skills. Like Jeff will tell you, I'm going to have to learn how to communicate effectively with others, which is a skill. And here's the most amazing thing, is all skills are learnable. You can learn any skill you need to move ahead. If you don't learn it, you don't learn it. But you can learn it. You can learn how to speak publicly. It's the most amazing thing. Most people who are competent speakers and presenters at one time were absolutely petrified of speaking. They would throw up at the thought of speaking. I had a good friend who's an accomplished public speaker. When he first got up to speak, he wet his pants and had to run off the stage. He was so afraid. And today he speaks to thousands of people and he's very highly paid and so on. So you can learn how to fly an airplane. You can learn how to type with a typewriter. You can learn how to do anything. You can learn any skill. So what these people did is they looked around, they said, what skills do I need to move ahead? I need to understand financial statements. So what they did is they didn't just read an article, is they took courses. They called it deliberate practice. They deliberately took a course that had a beginning, a middle, an end, and a grade. And they learned how to read financial statements. They learned how to do computer programming. They learned how to build teams. They learned how to do strategic planning. They learned how to interact with people, communicate, and so on. They just kept pinpointing and getting feedback, saying, what skills do I need? Almost like a mosaic to keep building the skills. And as a result, they just kept going further and further, upward and upward. And people looked around, and the people who are most responsible for their promotion say, these are the ones. These are the ones we want to be in charge. These are the ones we'll pull up. So what happens is everybody starts to support the people who are learning and growing. The people who aren't learning and growing are just ignored, just like sort of like trash bags by the side of the road, just drive past them because they have no future. I have, many years ago when I was doing sales training, I called on this company, and this company had the highest paid salespeople, and they sold office products, office machinery, computers, photocopiers, and things like that. But everybody who worked there made an average of 3 times as much as people who worked in competing companies selling similar products to the same market. And so I spoke with the sales manager, and he was a really smart guy. And I said to him, I said, how is it that you have so many top people? Why is everybody wants to work for this company? Everybody's in sales in this field. He said, I have a method of selection. And his method of selection is very simple. When a person came to apply for a job, he would say, well, before we talk about the job, he said, let's talk a little bit. Tell me, what are your favorite books, tapes, courses that you've taken for your own personal development? And he just waited for the answer. Now, it didn't matter what the answer was as long as the guy had an answer, or the woman had an answer. If a person said, oh, I like Napoleon Hill, and I'm just Zig Ziglar, I've done this and everything else, great, come on, sit down, can I get you a cup of coffee? But if a person said, well, geez, I don't know, I never read it, he'd say, let's not take up any of your time, I know you're busy, thank you so much for coming in. And he'd take them to the doors and wish them a good life, you have a good life. Because what he found was that people who are not committed to personal learning had no future. He said you don't try, as they say, to take ducks and help them, teach them to fly like eagles. You try to find eagles and teach them to fly in formation. The number one quality of successful people, which I've said to a jillion people, is ambition. Is they're hungry and they want to be successful, and as a result, they are willing to spend a substantial amount of their time learning how to be better at what they do. So many years ago, I met a man named Cobb Koppmeyer. Cobb Koppmeyer was famous because he had spent 54 years studying books of success, read more than 6,000 books. And he was looking for principles, success principles, and he finally came up with 1,000 success principles. And then he wrote 4 books with 250 principles each. Some of these principles were only half the page. Some were 2 or 3 pages. Some were very profound. Some were simple. Be punctual. If you'll be punctual, it'll put you in the top 2% of people. You'll be respected by everyone. Doors will open for you. People will admire you. They will think that you have other qualities. If you're punctual, people think you're smarter. If you're punctual, people think you're more confident at your work. If you're punctual, people think you're more dependable. Just being punctual. So that would be one of his success principles. He had 1,000. And I'd read all of his stuff. And a good friend of mine, Ty Boyd, audio programmed it. It's like 16 or 24 audio programs. He recorded the whole thing. And I'd read it, listened to it all, and I read the books from cover to cover because that was my study. I wanted to know what people in the top 20% did. So I read everything for year after year. I just gobbled this stuff. And one day, as it would happen, I was in a food fair in Washington, D.C., attached to the J.W. Marriott, big hotel there. And I sat down, it was just at lunchtime, and I had this table for 4, and the place was jammed. There was no place to sit, and I had gotten the last seat. So I'm sitting there eating in the food fair, and this old gentleman came by with his assistant, a young woman, and they were walking around with trays of food, and they're looking for a place to sit. There's no place to sit. And so I got up, and I said, excuse me, I've got lots of room. Please come and join me. Sit at my table. And they said, no, we wouldn't want to trouble you. I still remember this. Very gentle, very gentlemanly. And I said, no, please, I've got lots of room. Please sit down. So thank you so much. So I sat down. It turned out to be Cobb Koppmeyer, who I'd studied for years. So sort of like running into Peter Drucker or something like that. And he said, I'm Cobb Koppmeyer. I said, geez, I know your stuff. So we just had a wonderful talk because I had such a high regard for him. And then I later on asked him a question. And it was a question that you would ask. I said, you come up with 1,000 success principles, 4 books. The books that sold 50 million copies, got into 42 languages. I said, of all these principles, these 1,000 principles, what's the most important? What's the number one? Like Curly Joe and City Slickers, what's the number one? That's what all Americans want to know is what's one? Got 1,000 principles. What's